In many ways, Rome was the New York of the ancient world. It was big, noisy, crowded, rats, pigeons, lots of people, lots of bustle. In fact, our sources sound kind of like they're talking about New York sometimes. Martial contrasting the peace of Spain with the noise and activity of Rome. So I was thinking, while standing here in Washington Square next to the famous arch, what would a Roman think of New York City today? Now, obviously the first thing a time-traveling Roman would do would be to freak the hell out because of things like cars and iPhones. But after that, I think there'd be many things that were familiar about New York City. Above all, the sheer bustle around here, the crowds, the diversity, all of that. Rome was the first great multicultural metropolis, and that, I think, at least, would be very familiar to a Roman. Now, of course, a Roman would be impressed by the height of New York skyscrapers, but I think the idea of a skyscraper wouldn't be too alarming. After all, Rome had some very tall buildings. The Colosseum was almost 200 feet high, and some of the insulae, apartment buildings in Rome, were 10 stories or more. I think also that the volume of traffic on the streets here would have been kind of familiar. Of course, aside from the whole internal combustion engine thing, which would be rather new, though wheeled traffic was banned from the Roman streets for most daylight hours, so that would be a small shock, I suppose. That aside, the whole layout here, the grid pattern of streets, is very Roman, essentially, as of course are many architectural details. You know, the more I think about it, the more I think a Roman would like it here. The average size of a New York apartment compares favorably to one in Ostia, for example, and I think that the idea of a penthouse and elevators would be very appealing to a certain class of Roman. But the biggest surprise, the biggest pleasant surprise anyway, for a time-traveling Roman, would I think be the food here. Roman cuisine, of course, was full of delights and broader than what most people think. But even the street food here, with its vast range of tastes, will be at once familiar in some ways. Things like falafel and shawarma aren't too far off of Roman food, but also vastly more varied. Even pizza. There are, of course, some hints that the Romans had a kind of focaccia, a primitive pizza. There's that fresco from Pompeii. But I think the real deal with tomatoes, of course, the Romans didn't have those, and dripping with cheese, that alone would make it worth it, I think, for a time-traveling Roman here in New York City. Anyway, just some thoughts, spitballing here. If you have any ideas, leave them in the comments, and I look forward to reading them. Thanks for watching.